Calling all gardeners. Calling all gardeners. This is Mrs. Farmer Brown. And it's one of those, Houston, I got a problem moments. So, I have a question. Do y'all have cherry tomatoes running out your ears? Some people on my Facebook group page have asked me to do a video on cherry tomatoes because, as you know, if you grow cherry tomatoes, they do get to a point where they are running out your ears, which is why I've only planted 2 cherry tomatoes the last 2 years, the yellow pears and usually one of the reds that I like. So the Sweet 100s this year. So I'm going to show you 6 or 7 different things you can do and ways to preserve your cherry tomatoes. So here's number 1. So the absolute easiest is to freeze them. Just wash them up, put them in a baggie, put them in the freezer. So now let's talk about what you can do with these frozen puppies. Now with these frozen little cherry tomatoes, what can you do with them? Well, you can let them thaw. Then you can plop them in a stew or dice them up first if you don't like them whole, but they will disintegrate. But what if you don't like the skins? So here is the easy thing to do. Run some hot water. And then however many you want to thaw, I mean this is just a small bowl for demonstration purposes, but I'll put a yellow and a red. Seriously, it doesn't take a really long time. You just want to leave them in there long enough to where the skin starts shriveling up. Watch out, doggy. And then, voila, comes off very easily. Now occasionally you'll get one like this that you can feel all the moisture, but the skin doesn't want to pop. So if that happens, poke it. And then you can get it off. Now, if you're one that doesn't mind the skins, another way to freeze them is to put them in a blender, or in this case, this is a baby food processor. Grind them up. Probably if you're 30 years or younger, you don't know what this is. It's an ice cube tray. A long time ago, we didn't have ice makers. In fact, this will date me. When I was a little girl, we didn't have these that were plastic. We had metal ones with this little long handle. And you had to pull back on it to crack all the ice. You usually had to run it under some water first because you couldn't crack it. Same thing with these. You go pop, pop, pop. Anyway, you can use these and fill up your little ice cubes. Obviously, I'm not doing a whole tray. Again, just for demonstration purposes. Cover it with plastic wrap, stick it in the freezer. Once they're frozen, pop them out, put them in a baggie. Then they're real easy to add to whatever, especially soups, stews. Let me relieve that bowl. Pop, pop. There you have it. Freezing is always very easy and easy to reconstitute to use in various things. But if you want a fresher taste, because you won't get that with freezing, because they'll get mushy, we're on to number 2, fermenting. Now, fermenting is a really hot topic these days, and for good reason. When you ferment vegetables, fruits and vegetables, you are creating good bacteria. And when you eat that good bacteria, it's very good for your gut health. It helps with your digestion and your immunity, your immune system. So, I mean, how many of you may take probiotics? Well, this is the same thing, although instead of taking a pill, you're eating it. Now, one caveat here about fermenting cherry tomatoes. You may or may not like the end texture afterwards. If you don't, you can still benefit from the good probiotics very simply. All you have to do is remove your tomatoes and blend them in a blender. Keep it cold now. You don't want to heat them or you're going to lose the benefits of the probiotics. But that sauce is great over so many things. Think about a cold, rich tomato sauce over, say, fish tacos, or mixed in with a little mayonnaise on a sandwich. Even a tomato sandwich with mayonnaise. But if your mayonnaise had a little bit of this tangy, sweet and tangy at the same time, tomatoes blended in it, that would be yummy. Honestly, I think it would go on a lot of great things, especially fish, any fish, even shrimp. Imagine a shrimp salad or just a regular salad and use this as your dressing. So let's get started. I'll show you how to ferment some cherry tomatoes. It does help to have a few things in your wheelhouse if you're fermenting, in your supplies. This is one of the most important things right here, and that is a fermenting airlock lid. Do you have to use that? No, but I think it's a lot safer to have one. This is one of the newest types that I really, really like. The rubber gasket is right in here. And then this is a 3-piece airlock, which I'll show you how to use that when we get to the end. You're going to need salt because we are going to create a brine. The salt you use needs to be non-iodized. I like using pickling salt. And then of course you're going to need your vegetables. And then it also helps to have some sort of weight. I have 2 kinds of weights, but I'm choosing to use the glass weight this time for the tomatoes because I want it to be really heavily down under the brine. This is the other type of thing I have. It's not really a weight, but it fits in your jar right under the shoulder. Like such. But like I said, for this one I want to use the glass weight. So I have a quart jar here. The first thing I need to do is weigh my jar. So on my scale, I have it on grams, and I'm setting down my jar. Now I want to hit the tare button, T-A-R-E, which zeroes it out, so it doesn't count the weight of my jar. And you can put whatever you want in here in terms of seasonings, vegetables or herbs that you'd like to add to your cherry tomatoes. I'm choosing first to put some garlic in there. Probably you want about 1 clove for every cup that you have. These are small cloves, and I've got about 2.5 cups of cherry tomatoes that will be going in the jar. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just putting those 4 small ones in. Next, I'd like to flavor it a little bit with some basil, which is going in the bottom. And then maybe just to kick it up a notch, I've got a couple of my hot banana peppers, and I did slice a couple of slices down the side. Now, one thing about cherry tomatoes, you probably know, that the skins are pretty tough. So to get it where the brine is going to kind of really penetrate into the tomato, I'm going to poke it with a skewer. You can poke it all the way through if you want, but I'm just kind of pricking it. When I very first started fermenting a few years ago, the first time I used whey, W-H-E-Y starter, and I made my own whey, but that does take a bit of time. And honestly, when I switched to using a salt brine, I actually preferred the flavor with the salt brine, and I also prefer it with using pickling salt. Pickling salt is good because it also dissolves easily in water. Now, let's talk about the salt for a second. You can use like pink Himalayan, you can use kosher salt, any salt that doesn't have iodine in it. But most of the recipes you see out there on the internet talk about 2 cups of warm water to dissolve maybe 1 tablespoon of kosher salt or something like that in it. I have gone to a stricter guideline now in weighing to measure the salt. And I'll tell you why. Because not all salt is equal in terms of some salts are more dense than others. And that is why it's important to weigh it by the gram, as opposed to using imperial measurements such as, tablespoons when you're fermenting vegetables. You don't want them over salty. You also don't want to have enough salt in there where you're actually getting a good ferment. The next thing I'm going to do is add filtered water to the vegetables until we are at 1 inch. It would have been easier for me to just fill this up instead of putting my water in my bowl first, but oh well. All right, we're there. I'll dump this out. Now, once you have your jar full with your vegetables and your water, you want to weigh it. And because we've zeroed out the jar, all we are weighing are the vegetables and the water. And we are at 540 grams. Okie dokie. And now we need to do some math. 540 is the weight of the vegetables and the water. We're going to multiply that by between 2% and about 2.5%. So 2% would be 0.02, and I'm going to add 2.5 to that. So that's between 2% and 2.5%. Equals 12.15 grams of salt. So now you can take whatever you want to measure your salt with. I'm just going to use the bowl because it's here. Okay, I've zeroed it out. I'm going to put my bowl down. Hit the tare so that it zeroes that out. So I can just add salt. That was 12. Now I have my salt measurement. I'm going to put this on just so that I can get it out. Now this water is a little on the warm side right now, but I'm going to mix it up really well and let it come to room temperature, and then I will pour it back in my jar. The salt is dissolved, the water is room temperature now, so I'm just going to use my funnel and pour my brine back in. By the way, I see a piece of basil floating. Need to get rid of that. Anything that floats above your weight, you will need to discard even after you ferment and open it. If anything's floating, take it out, because you don't want that to be an area where bacteria can grow in. Now we need to get the airlock ready. The airlock is a 3-piece, and again, you need to make sure all this has been sterilized. The lid has some extremely tiny, tiny, tiny holes in them. I'm not sure you can tell that. Maybe I held it here. You might be able to see the tiny, tiny holes. Then you have this piece right here. And this center thing is where you want to keep just the air. You don't want water in that, just the air. So actually, I'm gonna go ahead and cover that up because I'm not very good at pouring. And you want to pour to your fill line. That's another thing I like about these, because you've got your fill line there. Got it a tiny bit too full. Okay, I'm right on it. That's just, again, just filtered water. It's not saline, not salt water. Put my lid on. Now you want to push your airlock down in your lid. Remember, it's already got a rubber gasket, so that's going to create your seal. There we go. It's on nice and tightly. I won't have to do any burping or anything like that if you've read anything about fermenting, because the gases will come up through here and they'll either go straight out and escape, or they'll go down into the water and then bubble back up and escape through these top holes. With cherry tomatoes, the fermenting time is a short one. You know, other things like sauerkraut, you ferment for 4 weeks. This is just going to ferment for between 3 to 5 days. So now at this point, I want to put it not in any kind of light, in other words, not near sunlight. So put it in a dark area of your kitchen. So there it is, nicely tucked back there. I will check it for taste in 3 days, and if I'm happy with it, I'll go ahead and undo the lid, undo the airlock, put a regular ringed lid on top of my mason jar, one like this, and store it in the refrigerator. It will be good in the refrigerator for up to 2 weeks. You need to use it by then. So that's pretty easy peasy. And remember, if you end up not liking the texture of the tomatoes, I still guarantee you're going to like the flavor. So consider whipping them up in a blender for that cold tomato sauce to add to so many yummy things. But if fermenting is not your thing, then how about we do some refrigerator pickled cherry tomatoes? I'm going to start with pickling these cherry tomatoes by making the brine first. And what we have here, 1 cup of cider vinegar, 1 cup of water, you have your choice on salt. Either 2 teaspoons of pickling salt, which is what I have here, or 1 tablespoon of kosher salt. And lastly, this is optional, 1 tablespoon of sugar. Now we're going to take this over to the stove, bring it to a boil, stir it constantly until that salt and sugar is dissolved. You have a couple of options again on prepping the tomatoes. You can either use a skewer and stab it part way or all the way through so that the brine will penetrate, or, I mean, it is just a pint. So I'm going to take the trouble to take the skins off. I boiled some water, it's really hot. Just gonna dump my tomatoes in there. Probably won't take more than about 90 seconds. All right, carefully drain off the water. And plunge it down into an ice bath. To prep the jar, I'm gonna add 1 clove of garlic, quarter to a half a teaspoon of peppercorns. And now we'll get those skins off. All right, my little pint of cherry tomatoes are all peeled. And now I'm going to pour the brine into the jar up to a 1/2 inch. And you may have some brine left over. At this point, I'm going to put on the lid, tap it on the counter a bit. Remove those air bubbles. Tighten your jar. We're going to leave it on the counter until it's completely room temperature and then put it in the refrigerator. You might be tempted to munch on these right away, but they're going to be best if you leave them for a minimum of 48 hours before you do your tasting. These will store in the refrigerator for up to 2 months. And don't forget to label. It's been 3 days. Taste test time. They're good. I think I will leave them 1 more day though, because it usually takes about 3 days for it to start getting cloudy in the bottom and for the probiotics to really start getting going. So, the good bacteria. So I'm going to close it back up. Those are good. I'm really thinking fish tacos are in the future. I think I'll make some and take some of these, like I told you, grind them up, use them as part of the sauce on fish tacos. So this is part 1 on ways to preserve your cherry tomatoes. Stay tuned for part 2 because we're going to have even more ways and a couple of recipes in there that I think you'll really enjoy. So remember, until next time, bye and have a good one.